What were the ship names for Katniss and Peeta and Katniss and Gale?
Katniss and Peeta's is Everlark.
Oh, that's nice.
Which is nice.
That's really pretty.
Better than Katniss. Katniss and Keeta.
Gatniss.
Katniss and Pale.
Gatniss. I'm sorry. What was Katniss and Gale? Was it Catale?
It's Everthorn.
Those are cool ship names.
Yeah.
Those are so
Everthorn.
cool.
Was Gale's last name?
Hawthorne.
Oh, okay. Everthorn's pretty great. People cared.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's
Hello.
Nostalgia Club. This is the podcast where three podcast editors get together and talk about some excellent stories that we read as kids. I'm Jino, and I'm joined today by...
Michael.
And Victoria.
And today is the second part of our two, maybe three, part Suzanne Collins extravaganza. Today we're talking about The Hunger Games, the best YA dystopia fiction. Don't lump it in with all the other ones that came afterwards. Don't do that to The Hunger Games. And Suzanne Collins, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
She writes with a fury that the other YA dystopia novels do not have, and that's what sets her apart.
We're drawing this line in the sand right now. If you're a famous author who's written another YA novel, don't even contact us. We definitely won't interview you. Please contact us. We'll interview anyone.
For those of you who don't know somehow what the Hunger Games are, I shouldn't talk down to you. There's a lot of media out there. For those of you who don't know what the Hunger Games are, it's a dystopia about the Hunger Games, which is where the ruling capital of Panem,
Of the Rocky Mountains.
of the Rocky Mountains, this
Of Denver, Colorado.
of Denver, Colorado.
Victoria's home country.
Denver actually doesn't match the area descriptors that Suzanne Collins writes for the capital in the books, but it is near the Rocky Mountains, so I just got excited. Anyways, carry on.
This nation that's
country.
risen out of the ashes of an apocalypse, some sort of terrible war, it demands tribute to children from each of the 12 districts that kind of act as like satellite states that send resources to the capital, the extravagantly wealthy capital. These 24 tributes, these children must fight to the death in an arena as a symbolic reckoning of a previous civil war in which the districts lost.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
Very
There's literally
concise.
a thing called the Treaty of Treason, which was signed when the war ended, and it agreed to the aforementioned Hunger Games.
Which is a very Gregor the Overlander way of naming things. Now that I think about it. Hey, Suzanne Collins also wrote Gregor the Overlander. And if you haven't listened to those episodes before this one, we're probably going to reference her previous works when we talk about the Hunger Games. And you should definitely also check out the Underland Chronicles because they are so good.
So good.
And like the Hunger Games, they talk about the concepts of a just war and an unjust war and the people and the policies and the socio-political environment that causes war to happen and how you are there. And it's bad. It's not a great time to be in a war.
Never a great time to be in a war.
Yeah.
Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick, because we spent a lot of time in our previous Gregor episode just like sitting in the stew of complex emotions and geopolitical ponderings and thinking about life. But there's a lot more room for just trash. Here.
Yeah.
There's a lot more room for just having fun with the Hunger Games because, I mean, it's weird because it's aimed at like an older demographic, but we got like love triangles here, people, and we got teenage angst in addition to
Extreme
reality
trauma.
TV.
yeah. We
Extreme
do.
trauma and reality TV.
And
Yeah.
Gino, I want to hear, because you were ready. You were ready with your thoughts about the love triangle. Just very briefly, lead character Katniss has a love triangle with Gale, who's her hunting partner, and Peeta, who is a baker. Yes, his name is Peeta, who gets thrown into the Hunger Games with her.
His name is Bread, and he lives in bread, and he makes bread. And that was really funny to me when I was 16. Everyone and their mom has an opinion on the Hunger Games love triangle. Are you Team Peeta or are you Team Gale?
We're asking you, Jino.
Well, my response for most of my life was Team Gale.
Ooh.
Gale kicks He's cool. He hunts. He cares for Katniss's family. He gets her lifestyle. Peeta's from a different social economic class. They have history together. And at least my younger opinion, Gale's turn in the third book when he suddenly becomes, for lack of a better word, war criminal, at least to a younger reader, it felt like out of nowhere. It felt like trying to justify Peeta's relationship with Katniss and trying to push Gale away. That's what I thought when I was a kid. But here's the thing. Reading these books from an older perspective, listening to or reading interviews with Suzanne Collins, the love triangle at the center of the Hunger Games is a metaphor. Suzanne Collins says explicitly she does not think of Gregor as a fantasy series. She does not think of the Hunger Games as a dystopia YA novel series. She thinks of them as war stories. That's the genre she's going for. Peeta and Gale represent two different ways to wage war.
Yeah.
And two different ways to resolve conflicts. And Katniss choosing between them is not about which hot boy will she choose, but I mean, yes, it is obviously, of course, about which hot boy will she choose, but also it is about how will she place herself in this war? How will she conduct warfare? And to what means will she go about trying to end the war? Peeta is always trying to talk to people and understand them. He's always trying to find a different solution. He is not inherently violent. He doesn't kill people unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't think he really kills anyone at all. In the movie, it's a little more ambiguous. He does maybe off someone. But at least in the book, you know, he really doesn't get a lot of chances and doesn't make the choice to hurt people. Gale is a lot more radicalized than Peeta. Gale is A-okay with massacring whoever he needs to in order to achieve the goal and get peace. And Katniss has to choose between them, and she chooses Peeta as her hot boy. But philosophically...
Does she?
Does she? But she's appalled with Gale's actions and Coin's actions. And then she assassinates Coin, and then she's just really tired.
And she knows that she can be tired with Peeta.
Yeah.
Because Gale's still got a lot of that energy in him.
That's the end of my analysis. Throwing it over to you guys. Help!
No, that's great. That sounds like a great analysis and a great representation. I mean, I think we talked about this even to some degree, where it's like, it should be fairly apparent to everyone that the point of the Hunger Games or of Katniss's relationship to one of two hot boys isn't about the hot boys. Like, even if you didn't know about the metaphorical nature of it all, it's like Katniss's relationship to the hot boys is ancillary to her place in this whole thing. And by the end of it, you know, it almost doesn't even quite matter. It's like a hollow sort of presence at the end. It's like,
yeah, because she's, at the end of the day, her impact on the war is symbolic. It is not actionable. And she does take one big action at the very end, but the rest of it, she's like not the essential piece, because there's a million essential pieces.
Yeah.
She's not the hero. She's just a hero. And also, man, which boy's hotter? It's really tough, you know, because one of them is a Hemsworth brother, and the other guy, he's really good at whistling. So, like, you know.
Oh, the memes.
The memes. Hey, you guys remember Tumblr back in the day
Yeah,
when these movies came out?
I steered clear of it as much as I could.
It was violent. Hey, Victoria, what do you think?
So the main reason why I wanted us to talk about the Hunger Games and revisit these books was, well, there's many reasons. But the main thing is, when I read the Hunger Games in high school, I remember it left an impression on me. But to be honest, when I think back to that time and my overall thoughts on the Hunger Games, all I could remember was this Team Peeta or Team Gale debate, where everyone was just like, who is Katniss going to end up with? That's all people talked about at lunch when you talked about the Hunger Games.
Wow.
And the movies were coming out and they were like, oh my gosh, well, like, obviously Gale, because it's Liam Hemsworth and he's way more attractive than Peeta or whatever.
Gosh, sorry, Josh Hutcherson.
No, I disagree. But like, that's what people thought at the time.
Yeah, we got one for you, Josh Hutcherson.
Josh Hutcherson, if you're listening.
We know he's a fan of this book.
No. Okay, but I think that, first of all, it's very telling that the way that the movies were marketed to be more focused on the love triangle and the love story is exactly what Suzanne Collins was talking about in this book, where all of this horrible stuff is happening and the Capitol is just like, but look, they're in love. Aren't you excited about them? Don't you want to ignore the idea of revolution?
You're so right.
You're so right.
Yeah. So, first of all, very ironic. Second of all, I just think that now that I'm older and having experienced the world as I have, I think I have a much better appreciation for these books. And also because I reread The Hunger Games directly after we read the Gregor the Overlander series, I also got a deeper understanding, I feel like, of what Suzanne Collins was trying to do in The Hunger Games. Because, well, first of all, I'm Team Peeta.
Boo! Boo! What does Peeta do? Bake bread? Boo!
Provide emotional support?
Gale could do a 360 no-scope on the back of his tank. What's Peeta gonna do? Sent to war prison?
No, but even when I was going into rereading The Hunger Games, which, by the way, for context, we decided we were just going to read the first Hunger Games series and perhaps watch the movie and talk about those two and how they compare. But I was like, I want to read all 3 books because I've been wanting to reread the series anyways. So I decided to read all 3 books all the way through in like 5 days, basically. And also a couple months ago, I did read the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So this is all to say I'm in it deep, right? And I'm just like analyzing like everything that Suzanne Collins has put into these books. For me, when I went into rereading, I kind of like almost had the opposite expectation where I was like, oh, well, when I was a kid, all people would focus on was the love story. So maybe it wasn't actually as prevalent in the books as I thought it was. But no, these books are about love. But it's not just the romantic love between Katniss and Gale and Peeta. It's about Katniss's love for her sister, for her family, the people around her, and also about her allowing other people to love her.
Yeah.
And I also saw a post that said, for Katniss, love is revolutionary. Because all of the decisions that she makes that make an impact on people, that turn her into this Mockingjay figure, not because of what other people are doing to like cause her to be the Mockingjay. All of the things that she does just herself that cause her to be this spark, she does out of love.
Yeah, that's true.
A lot of people are also like, well, it feels like the romance between Katniss and Peeta is so forced because like President Snow made them be together. But it's clear from the internal dialogue of Katniss as a narrator, which you don't get, unfortunately, in the movies as much. But it's clear that Peeta is really important to her.
Yeah.
And for a long time, she doesn't even know why he's so important. She doesn't know if it's romantic or like friendship or like really anything like that because she, first of all, just doesn't have time to figure it out. And she's just focused on getting through the games or getting through the war, that she doesn't have time until the very end to decide, what do I actually want for myself now that I have the choice? So that's my take.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And this has been Nostalgic.
Hope you liked our discussion of the Hunger Games, at least all the important parts. No, I'm same. I'm Team Peeta. I found myself veering a little more towards Gale on a second read through, but then I was like, oh yeah, he goes pretty hardcore at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The one thing that would prevent me from saying like, yeah, oh yeah, Katniss should get with Peeta is just like knowing that in that like 3rd book or whatever, like Peeta gets conditioned into a sleeper agent and like nearly kills Katniss a couple times,
Well,
which I mean, Katniss is definitely not me, but I would be like, I don't know if I can feel safe around you the same way I did before because you got secret spy stuff in your brain that has prompted you to attack me at least twice.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Catching Fire and Mockingjay as much, but that whole storyline I thought was really important because basically like in The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, Katniss is like, well, I know that Peeta loves me. But she doesn't really understand why, because she's like, there's so many like dark and ugly parts of me that it feels to her like Peeta is just overlooking them because he's so like enamored with her. It isn't until book 3 when he loses that facade and suddenly he does call her out for those dark parts of her. And then both of them actually have to actively choose to reconcile. Because for most of their relationship, it's like, I'm not telling you this thing, you're not telling me this thing. They've never been fully honest with each other. They've never met each other at their baseline.
Yeah.
Mockingjay is what forces them to actually have the hard conversations that they've been avoiding having. And to be fair, some of it like happens off screen, which is why I can see why people are like, well, it doesn't feel like they like should have ended up together at the end anyways. But I don't know. That's just kind of how I interpreted it. Anyways, I digress. Back to the Hunger Games.
No, it was on top.
That was about the Hunger Games. It's all Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I just have a lot of thoughts
Well, start saying them.
because I read all of these books in the last week.
Yeah, Jino and I reread just number 1.
Yeah,
Well-
read one, and then I also watched the movie.
I just reread one, and by reread, I mean I listened to the audiobook on 2 times speed.
Nice.
Which a testament to
These games are fast.
Tatiana. Oh, I forget her last name. Is it Tatiana Maslany, actress?
Oh.
And reader for the Hunger Games audiobook. Very clear enunciation. Even listening back on 2 times speed, trying to make up time, I was like, I can understand everything she's saying.
Nice.
But yeah, Victoria read all 3 books.
Yes.
So you have thoughts.
I have a lot of thoughts. I actually have some starting discussion questions.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Ooh.
Hey, this is a book club, folks.
Yeah. Well, okay. It's mainly because I was like, there's so much I feel like we could talk about, but there are some specific things that I do think it'd be interesting for us to dive into.
Yeah.
So, first thing is the star-crossed lovers plan, I think is really interesting because in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
you get to see more of Haymitch's side, which obviously in the books you don't because it's all Katniss's point of view. In the movie, though, Haymitch is the one who like has a conversation with the Gamemaker and is like, people are kind of rioting. Maybe you should distract them with a love story. But I also was wondering, like, do you think Peeta and Haymitch kind of planned this together? Because it's like the whole star-crossed lovers thing couldn't have even happened unless Peeta said what he said on stage, where he's like, yeah, like, I actually have a crush on Katniss, blah, blah.
The way I interpreted it, and I think Haymitch says some things that might back me up here, Peeta was genuinely infatuated with Katniss
Yeah.
from, I guess, early childhood. And I think Haymitch just pushed him to act on it in front of the cameras. But he was careful not to explain the plan to Peeta too much because he didn't want to interfere with Peeta's instincts, which
Yeah.
were to declare love and protect Katniss. So I think Peeta was in on part of the plan, but I don't think he realized it was a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Katniss had to be in on the entire plan because Katniss, for lack of a better phrase, had no media training and so needed to be convinced to do all these things
Yeah.
in order to save both their lives.
Yeah. Because it's also interesting because once they get into the arena, Peeta joins the career pack for a bit. And they say specifically, like, the career pack is determined before the games even start. Like, you don't go into the games and then you start brokering these alliances. It's decided outside. So I think what happened is Peeta asked Haymitch to train him separately. And then the two of them kind of were like, okay, what's like the game plan? And then perhaps Peeta was like, well, I want to prioritize helping Katniss. And then Haymitch kind of like took that and ran with it.
Yeah. Well, the careers imply that they're only keeping Peeta around until they kill Katniss.
Yeah.
So at least my interpretation of it is that Peeta got caught and then talked his way into this situation.
It
In
is
the book- in
definitely
the-
ambiguous.
In the book, he runs towards the cornucopia. In the movie, he runs away. Am I thinking that correctly? Or does he run away in both the book and the movie?
Based on my brief skim of the start of the Hunger Games in the book, all that happens is Katniss is standing on the pedestal waiting for the games to start. She sees the bow in the cornucopia and she makes eye contact with Peeta
And he's
and he
shaking his
says,
head.
no, like, don't go for it.
Yeah.
And in that split second, she is like, oh, shoot, the games are starting. I lost my chance to just like make a run for it for the bow. And so she's just like, okay, fine, I'll like get this backpack at least. But I don't think she actually sees where Peeta went
Okay.
because there's no time to.
Then I'm going to assume that Peeta ran away from the cornucopia
Yeah,
and then probably got caught.
gotcha. I mean, it's not like impossible for the careers to let someone in.
Because that's not the only time they did it. They let in the kid from I think,
5.
5?
Yeah.
To rig the mines.
Yeah.
There was no way that was a pre-game plan. They wouldn't know necessarily
But the landmines are a common thing in every game.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Like everyone knows that if you step off the pedestal too soon, you're just going to get blown up by a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Who knows?
anyways, this goes into my next question. I think Cinna's character is really interesting I always thought like, oh, Cinna is like such a great character. Like he's basically like one of the few people in the capital that Katniss trusts, and he like becomes a close, like trusted friend and mentor. But in my reread, I actually was like, Cinna is actually like pulling some interesting strings, and it could be argued that Katniss has no say in what he's doing. Like he's the one who's like, I'm going to put her in this wedding dress and catching fire that's going to turn into a Mockingjay. She has no idea that he's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, the introduction of Cinna in the first Hunger Games book is interesting because Katniss is like, oh man, like you got assigned to 12. That's a bummer. And he's like, no, actually, I chose 12. He has like this whole plan for how he like plans on like making sure that Katniss catches the attention of the sponsors and etc. A question I had was, is Cinna already part of the revolution at this point? Is he intentionally trying to make Katniss a symbol because he was either inspired by her volunteering for Prim or just because this was the plan all along? It's also interesting to think, like, at this point of the rebellion, are they just kind of, like, waiting for, like, something to happen in the games that will be, like, their catalyst that they can just run with?
I would say so. It's Cinna's first game. He requested 12. He saw Katniss volunteer and was like, this is what I'm doing. It's resistance through art. That's Cinna, right?
Pretty much.
Revolution through art, through expression. And so, yeah, I mean, he's an extremely clever, manipulative person who also just happens to be very kind to Katniss. But he's definitely doing things that he knows might get Katniss in trouble and will definitely get him killed.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think he was just like crouching in the wings, waiting for something to happen that he could take advantage of. And he saw it, and he just happened to be the right place and right time.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Plutarch.
Yeah.
Plutarch was, yeah, he was just waiting. He was like number 2 in the Mysterious Benedict Society. You know, what she could have been. Wrong place, or right place, wrong time. Plutarch and Cinna were right place, right time.
Yeah.
There was probably an entire multiple generations of these people who are waiting for a chance to take down the capital. And Katniss was just there. And so they took her.
That's something that I really enjoy the movies for, and we kind of talk about this briefly in the Gregor episode, like the additional perspectives you could get with like a movie.
Yeah.
Because even in just like the first one, we get like a whole side perspective from Seneca Crane, the like Gamemaker.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
You get a little indication of like some of the pressures on him to deliver like a compelling game, and it almost adds like a bit of an explanation for like the reason the Capitol sort of like when Katniss and Peeta threaten to basically double off themselves at the end, it sort of gives an indication of why did they bend the rules and double back and kind of, because they sort of make a fool of themselves in a way.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you hired the wrong director. The guy started buying his own press too much and he got too into the love story. And it cost him his life.
In the second movie, Catching Fire, I think Plutarch kind of takes advantage of the Capitol's tendency to do things that they think will pacify the people.
Yeah.
Basically, in Catching Fire, people are very unhappy, and Katniss has given them a reason to start fighting back. And so Plutarch is the one who tells President Snow, like, hey, well, let's double the guards in 12. Let's take down the black markets. Let's make them hate Katniss because she's the reason why this is happening to them. But instead, it actually fuels the fire more because then they get footage of like Katniss trying to stop a peacekeeper from murdering Gale, essentially.
Oppression breeds revolution.
Yeah.
Andor.
Sorry. Yeah, I do think like having those different perspectives is really interesting, especially like if you are just watching Catching Fire for the first time and you don't know that Plutarch is on the rebellion side. The things that he's saying, you'd be like, man, like that's really dark. Like you're just gonna like double down on these people and try and like squash the rebellion like this. And it seems like a totally reasonable thing for him to say, but he's like 3 steps ahead.
I know that a popular opinion about the second book and movie is that the movie did it better than the book. Like people found the pacing of the second book a little lopsided, and the movie was able to correct for a lot of those like pacing issues. I was just curious because you've recently experienced the book again. Like Suzanne Collins, her themes and her messages are really, really strong.
Yeah.
But I mean, no book is perfect. So like books 2 and 3, once we're like moving outside of like the structure of a Hunger Game, like how did that hold up for you?
So personally, Catching Fire is my favorite book and movie.
Mm.
I actually, when I rewatched the Hunger Games movie after reading the first book, I actually didn't like the movie that much. And I do remember when I watched it as a kid, it didn't work for me. Part of it was because they decided to do this like handheld camera thing that made everyone nauseous.
Yeah.
And when I rewatched it, within 5 minutes, I was already like, guys, literally like nothing action-y is even happening. Like all that's happening is Katniss is just walking through District 12 and I already feel like kind of like motion sick.
Knowing what I know about you, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
No, literally I was like, I think it benefited me to watch it on like a smaller TV screen where I could like look away every so often if it got to be too much. Not because of any violence, but just because of the motion blur of it.
That's so valid, though.
But also, this is a tendency I find with most Hunger Games adaptations, actually, is the movies always feel too fast-paced. Because the books have a lot more added details and nuance that can't really come across in a movie. And Suzanne Collins does a very specific, like, 3-act structure for her books as well. But sometimes those acts don't quite align with what a typical movie 3-act structure would be. So personally, for Catching Fire, what I enjoyed about the book was that, and I realized I was like, this is very intentional on her part after reading Gregor, was Suzanne Collins focused more on the aftermath of how Katniss feels about the games, and you get to sit with her a lot longer. Similarly, in the Hunger Games movie, or the Hunger Games book, after Katniss gets out of the games, there's still several more chapters just about her wrestling with what to do after the games.
Yeah, the movies ended really fast.
Yeah, after the movies, it's like, oh, the games are over. We're done. Whereas the books focus on, wow, being a victor actually kind of sucks. It's not great.
One could almost see the Hunger Games movies as the propaganda that is made
Literally, that's
after
what I'm
the
saying.
revolution.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're just more focused on the games, and Suzanne Collins is more focused on the impact of the games. But I understand why they made the changes that they did. For Catching Fire, I haven't finished like rewatching all of Catching Fire. I just watched like briefly like the first act earlier today just so I could talk about it a little bit. But so far, I've been liking the added backstory that they've done for Catching Fire, but I also am missing some of the aftermath of you seeing how this all is affecting Katniss.
Yeah, we lose a lot of her, all of her inner monologue.
Yeah.
So her perspective is cut short. I know a lot of comments on the movie were like, oh, like she's so like unemotional, she's so stoic, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, she's traumatized.
Yeah.
What do you want from her?
Exactly, which is why I'm saying like maybe that's another reason why people think the Katniss and Peeta relationship feels forced is because so much is happening in Katniss's internal monologue. And again, like she doesn't even know how she feels about Peeta. So it's just like, we're the outsiders looking on. We're almost like the people in the districts who are like, I don't believe this. I don't think you guys are actually in love.
Need more kisses. Maybe we'll give you some soup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similarly, in the movie adaptation for the prequel, the third act in the book is actually the longest. And even though it's a much longer movie, they made it like almost 3 hours, I think.
I know they talked about wanting to cut it in half, but the director was like, that went really badly last time. Please keep it one movie.
For what it's worth, I really liked Mockingjay Part 1. I think it did a lot for the first half of that book.
I'm most excited to rewatch Mockingjay. Well, I only watched Mockingjay Part 1. I never watched Mockingjay Part 2 because I could never get over... I was like, I can't watch Finnick die.
Oh. Finnick!
Yeah, sorry. Side note, reading Catching Fire again, I was like, Finnick is 24. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyways, but a lot of the nuance of the prequel and the third act specifically, which is like a huge turning point into your understanding of the character of who will become President Snow is lost, unfortunately, in the movie adaptation. Yes. So,
well,
it's fine. Go read the books. But the movies are still pretty good adaptations as far as adaptations go.
I think they're, I can say this with confidence, the best YA dystopia movie adaptations we got.
Yeah.
The shaky cam in the first movie, while clearly meant to obscure the sight of children dying, I think the cinematography in the first movie is actually, if not, amazing, is really well thought out. If anything, the movie is really great at capturing place and tone
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're watching a documentary in the first
Yes,
bits
yeah.
in District 12. And then when you move to the capital, the camera gets really steady and it begins to sweep around and circle the characters. And so you feel like it's a sports movie all of a sudden. And then as soon as you drop back into the arena, we get a lot of like security camera shots and man desperately sprinting after Katniss with a camera shot.
I also think that the movie does a great job of, even though you don't have Katniss's internal monologue, you still feel like you're in there with her.
Yeah.
So part of that is the cinematography, but it's also the sound design.
Hey.
Is very subjective to what Katniss is seeing or feeling. So for example, when the games first start, which again, you could argue it's because they didn't want to make it so graphic when it's a literal bloodbath and like all these children screaming and dying would be very concerning to watch. But like the sound kind of like goes out at that point.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It kind of, yeah.
She's freaking out.
She's freaking out. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, she's just like looking around and she's trying to get her bearings. And I think that's probably pretty realistic to what she might actually experience or what you might experience if you were in her shoes getting thrown into these games.
Yeah. Second movie, too. I know this is a really frequently cited effect, but when she's in the tube in the second movie and she sees Cinna die, the frame expands.
Yeah.
Like the aspect ratio changes
Oh, yeah.
as she's rising out, and the lights blind you as the viewer. And so you get the same disorientation that she does.
Mm-hmm.
Really creative.
Just really excellent filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get that necessarily. Like, an adaptation often has the connotation of like, oh, it's going to be cheap and fast and they're going to throw it out there and rake in the money. But like the Hunger Games team really
They thought about
the
Mhm.
artistic aspects of the filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I know Suzanne Collins was directly involved with the script in the first Hunger Games movie.
Mhm.
I don't think she was in the other three. I don't know about Songbird, Ballad of Snakes and Songbirds. But she definitely was involved at some point in the script writing or the story aspect of the first Hunger Games movie. Hey, she wrote for TV. She knows what she's doing.
it.
At the very least, I think that the other movies, I appreciate, well, like all the movies, I appreciate that they did think like, okay, what are things we could add that maybe she didn't get a chance to do in the books?
Yeah, things
Like-
were only implied in the books.
Yeah.
As much as I wish we got more of Katniss's perspective in the movies, I really, really like all the Gamemaker President Snow behind the scenes. I really, really appreciate like just politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really succinctly written and really cleverly done. And that Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Mm,
Oh, he's good.
he's good.
It's like what you were saying, Victoria, those little scenes where he's like, okay, here's what your political, like, psychology of the people concern is.
Yeah.
Here's how we fix it.
Mhm.
Here's the public perception angle of it. Here's how you manipulate people. And then you see how that backfires.
Yeah.
And then whenever Snow comes at him like, that didn't work and you're in trouble, Philip Seymour Hoffman's like, relax. Here's why it went wrong. It's not my fault. Here's how we pivot.
Yeah.
And then when he finally runs out his goodwill at the end of Catching Fire, he's gone. He's out.
Yeah. I think the movie showing Plutarch's perspective also answered kind of my question that I had when I was reading Catching Fire, where I was almost like, it does feel a little bit convenient that the quarter quell obviously it was a deliberate decision by President Snow, but it did feel a little bit like, okay, they want to get all the victors out. President Snow decided to throw them all into one location. That makes it a little bit easier. And it feels like, okay, like, did they plan for this to happen? Or were they just kind of like, okay, once we figure out what the quarter quell is going to be, we're going to figure out an escape plan to like put this into action. But then in the movies, it's basically like you can see Plutarch being like, okay, so we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. And he's like laying out the chess pieces
Mhm.
so that the rebels' plan can work.
Yeah. And I think it also speaks to, just like in real life, you can have a chess master laying out your chess pieces, but you can't predict the board.
That's true,
And
yeah.
so much of what happens in Hunger Games is just like random chance that they moved on.
Yeah.
Like it just happened to be the 74th before the 75th. It just happened to be Katniss volunteering, just happened to be Peeta.
Yeah.
And they just went for it.
Mm-hmm.
You could have all the chess pieces. You can have like a mastermind, and then the board is unveiled and you're like, ooh. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, technically, they do kind of account for this a bit because in the games or in Catching Fire, there's this whole thing where they have to communicate with the victors who know the plan through bread.
I forget that
Yeah.
part.
I also forgot about it. And then it happened and I was like, something's up with this bread.
The nation's name is bread.
Finnick's really
If the plan is a go,
obsessed.
we get a nice brioche loaf fresh from the oven. But if it's not a go, we get some really old rye.
Catching Fire is kind of funny when you read it because the entire time Katniss is like picking up on things that are like a little bit weird, but she has like no idea what's going on. She's just like, Finnick is really obsessed with this bread.
No, I think it's actually really great you point that out because in the first book, Katniss is sort of in the know of the plan.
Yeah.
And Peeta's not. And now in
Yeah.
the second book, she's suddenly just like out of it and she hates that.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, people rag on Katniss's character like, oh, she's so mean. Why doesn't she just do the thing? She's traumatized. She's been traumatized her whole life.
Yeah.
Cut her some slack.
Basically, the bread thing is the mentors will send bread to their little alliance because in Catching Fire, the alliance is Katniss, Peeta, Finnick, Mags, later
Mags.
Joanna, Beetee, and Wyrus. They send bread and the type of bread, wherever the bread comes from, because in book 1, Peeta does this whole thing where he explains to Katniss, like, this bread is from District 4, and this
That's
bread is from
right.
District 3. So that comes back in Catching Fire, where Finnick gets a parachute of District 4 bread, and it's just one. And so the amount of bread is meant to be what time the escape plan is happening. And the district number is what day it's happening. So initially the plan was day 4 at 1 a.m. is when the escape is happening. So Finnick's like, okay, I acknowledge that. But Katniss is like, he's really into this bread. Maybe it's just because he's like sad and like misses District 4. And then later on when they meet up with the others, there's clearly a change of plans because then they send District 3 bread and there's 24 loaves. So that means at midnight the escape plan is happening. And I assume
lot
they
of bread.
accelerated
That's a
the
good
plan
amount of
because like
bread.
so many people died so much faster than they thought.
Probably.
And already Katniss and Peeta were like, we gotta get out of here. This alliance is gonna turn real bad by the time all these people die. Like, yeah.
Man, I want some bread now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bread is
same.
good.
You got to imagine when they were like adjusting the plan on the fly. They're like, what's our new time? We're moving it up. Oh, midnight? Oh, man. All right. Send 24 loaves of bread in there.
Yeah. Oh, going back to book to adaptation changes. One thing I definitely missed from the book to the movie adaptation for The Hunger Games is they got rid of the character of Madge, who is Katniss's friend,
Oh,
who's the mayor's daughter.
She
gives
was
her the
interesting.
pin.
Yeah, she gives her the
She
pin.
gives Katniss the pin. In the movie, they just have Katniss buy it from the Hob
Mhm.
and give it to Prim, and then Prim gives it back to Katniss. But in the
She
book,
doesn't buy it, though.
oh yeah,
it's a gift
from the
old lady number 1.
yeah. But still, it's like I thought it was really interesting because basically, like after Katniss gets reaped, she's allowed to say goodbye, and she gets visited by her mom and Prim, of course, and Gale. But then, surprisingly, she gets visited by Madge, who previously she was like, "We're not really friends. Like we go to school together, but she's the mayor's daughter, so clearly, like we have very different lives."
Well, it's like Madge doesn't hang out with other people and Katniss doesn't really hang out
Yeah.
with other people. And I think she said, like, well, we're sort of grouped together by default and we just don't really talk that much.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my friend.
Yeah, but at the same time, like she and Gale are always like, man, like Madge has it so much better than us.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Class solidarity.
Yeah, 'cause she's clearly well fed. Which also another interesting theme of the Hunger Games is they talk about how the Capitol purposely pits like the poor people against like the merchant class
Mhm.
as a way to just like forget about the Capitol isn't the enemy. It's like you guys can infight amongst yourselves about who's like got it worse.
Just really clever, absolutely ruthless manipulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I thought it was impactful that Madge visits Katniss before she goes to the games and gives her the pin that previously Katniss was like, dang, that pin could feed like a whole family for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also important because you need that escalation of oppression in book 2. They need somewhere worse to go. They make a point in book 1 that like the peacekeepers are here, everyone's poor and starving, it's terrible, but because it's 12, the Capitol kind of just ignores them. And so the peacekeepers are kind of in on it with the citizens,
Yeah.
and the merchants will buy your like illegal goods, and the peacekeepers will let you hunt, and like everyone's having a bad time, and even the oppressors are kind of like, this sucks and we're also in on it a little bit, just because the Capitol ignores them. And it paints an oppressive picture while also giving them a much worse place to descend to, because
Yeah.
suddenly when you have the Capitol zeroing in on you, all the old peacekeepers are shipped out and all the competent peacekeepers are shipped in, and suddenly the class divide becomes really apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of, I guess, connection between, these two very disparate lives is lost.
Yeah. Katniss and Madge actually become good friends by the start of Catching Fire. And Katniss says, like, oh, like, I actually, like, go to the mayor's house for dinner a lot of the times. And then it's later revealed that Madge's aunt was the other tribute during Haymitch's games.
Oh.
And also, Katniss's mom used to be good friends with Madge's mom. So there's, like, all these, like, interconnected
right, because
community
Katniss's mom
things.
is from the merchant class.
Yes.
Small district.
Small district, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of missed that a bit. Which similarly, another relationship I missed that they couldn't really expand on just due to time in the movies is the relationship that Katniss has with her prep team.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's really
fascinating.
interesting because it's like her prep team is basically like a look into what life in the Capitol is like, what the people in the Capitol think about the Hunger Games, because they're just like, Katniss is like going through trauma and her prep team is just gushing over like, that was so amazing. Or like when she comes back from the games, she notes that the prep team is talking about the games and like all these like big moments that happened, but only in relation to what they were doing. Like, oh, when so-and-so died, I was in the shower. Or when this big thing happened, I was eating lunch. And so it's like, even though they're talking about other people's lives, it's all directly related to what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And her relationship with her prep team continues through Catching Fire when she gets reaped again because of the Quarter Quell. Her prep team is really sad. They kind of did this in the movie just through the form of Effie, which I think is smart because like I think they made Effie's character even more interesting.
Yeah, they really expanded her role in Mockingjay too.
Yes.
Like she got way more screen time
Yes.
than book time.
Well, in the book Mockingjay, her prep team gets brought to District 13 and then they're like tortured by Coin. Not tortured, but like they're treated very
Asked
badly.
questions very intensely.
Well, like Coin tells Plutarch, we're going to keep them in confinement for security reasons. But even Plutarch doesn't realize that what confinement means is these people have literally been put in a cell and they're handcuffed to the wall. They've been given very little food and water and just like horribly bruised and beaten as well.
Solivet 2.0.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. I was going to say that President Coin reminded me of Solivet a lot as
There was a
well.
little Rip Red and Plutarch and Haymitch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a rift in Katniss and Gale's relationship because Katniss is horrified to see her prep team in such a state. Gale's like, why do you care so much about them? They were the ones who made you look pretty for their games. Like, they're part of the system that put you in there. And she's like, no, but like, they care about me. And then Katniss herself struggles a bit where she's like, am I trying to justify what the Capitol is doing? No, but like, they do kind of mean a lot to me. And I know that I mean a lot to them. So again, it's just like another relationship dynamic that Suzanne Collins explores in the books that I think is fascinating.
It's easy to other someone unless you actually meet them.
Yeah.
And then once you spend time with them, it becomes very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gale should read The Underland Chronicle.
Yeah.
Because that's like, again, a major theme of Suzanne Collins' writing. The complexities of where you were born and what culture you're in and what your side is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily make you... It's always more complicated. Everything is always more complicated
Yes.
than it initially seems.
Mm-hmm.
You can be, like, her prep team is complicit without understanding
Mm-hmm.
the depth of their complicitness.
Yeah.
A lot of the citizens of the Capitol are complicit to an extent. I mean, it seems absolutely unbelievable from our perspective. Like, how could you watch a game where people fight to the death for each other? And to a certain degree, you can recognize that, like, other citizens of the Capitol also recognize that as well. Like, this is a nightmare. Like, Cinna obviously recognizes that something's got to be done or he's got to fight back in his own way. But, like, Katniss's prep team are, like, deep in the paint.
Yeah.
And so they are, like, complicit without recognizing the depth of the harm that they're doing.
Yeah.
Until it becomes like a little too hard for them to ignore.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like they're sort of impotent to really do anything about it, aside from be like, well, I guess I'll just be sad while I dress you up.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting, I was talking about it with you, Victoria, a little bit, and Jino just brought it up, the Rip Red, like from Underland Chronicles, Rip Red being comparable to Haymitch and Plutarch Heavensby a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that Rip Red is, in the series that's geared toward a younger demographic, Rip Red is highly competent in like every field.
Yeah.
Like he has his pitfalls. Like there's a reason why he doesn't get elected to the Regalian Council at the end.
Yeah.
Because everyone's kind of afraid of him.
And he fails with the Bane.
And he fails with Bane. But he's also like the best fighter in the Underland. He's one of the most clever people ever. And he's like a through and through pretty solid mentor for Gregor. I mean, he's not perfect by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
But Haymitch and like Plutarch are very much like they are mentors for Katniss and Peeta. And they have layers that you discover when you get to know them more.
And they're really connected. They're way more connected than you would ever have realized.
Oh, yes. Much like Rip Red. Much more connected than you would ever realize. But at the same time, it's like Haymitch won his Hunger Games, but he's not going to be able to jump into the fray to save Katniss in the way that Rip Red jumps in to save Gregor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He has perspective, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's like, I can give you advice, but I can't really do much beyond that. I can't be there to like cover your six or whatever.
That's a big difference, I think, between the two series, is that Gregor is the warrior. He fights. But Katniss is the Mockingjay. She is a symbol.
Yeah.
And so Hunger Games isn't about like how good can you stab? It's about like how can you inspire people? How can you lead people? And then like what choices do you have to make? I mean, Underland is also about that, but also Gregor is like rage mode. I attack the Bane with my magic sword. Like
spin attack.
Yeah, spin attack. Which for the life of me, I cannot picture just like a 12-year-old kid spinning real fast with two swords.
Yeah,
I mean,
every time
like,
they talked about the spin attack, I was like, I'm going to brush over that.
That's another reason I think it could only work in animation.
Yeah.
You can sell a spin attack in animation.
That's true, yeah.
Anime does it all the time.
yeah.
Live action would be a little tricky.
Yeah. I mean, this jumps to something I do think is really interesting and I wanted to talk about, but the way that Katniss is literally just thrown around by a bunch of people to become their symbol.
She's a resource to them.
Yeah. Especially in Catching Fire, which again, like as we said, like she has no idea what's going on. And in book 3, when she is implored to be the Mockingjay, first they try to like pre-write scripts for her to say so they can like film these like propaganda films, but like she's like really bad at it because she can never say things that she's like forced to say and like make it believable. But there's also a lot of commentary that she makes herself of like Plutarch is just interested in having a good show.
She loses all of her autonomy.
Yes.
And it infuriates her. And they need to basically trick her into doing what they want her to do again and again and again until she basically snaps and she's like, I am going to take action now of my own volition. Which is when she goes to the Capitol to try to assassinate Snow, and it all goes terribly wrong because that's not what the revolution needs from her.
Yeah, like she's like, okay, fine, I'll be your Mockingjay. What do you need me to do? Like, I'll fight. And they're like, well, we don't want you in the fight because we don't want you to die because then we lose our symbol. Not because we like care about you. I mean, your life is important, but it's mainly because we don't want people to lose hope in their Mockingjay.
If Chester Cheetah dies, Cheetos is finished.
Yeah.
If Ronald McDonald goes, who will sell me French fries?
Yeah.
If Katniss goes, how will we wage war against the oppressors?
But basically, like, her team is, like, sent around to the battle, but just, like, at the outskirts of battle, so, like, they can't really do anything.
She's wearing a costume, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, it is a functional costume. Like, Cinna designed her Mockingjay suit to...
But it's still a costume.
Yeah, that's true.
Does it have pockets?
You better hope so. Where's she going to put her arrows? Pocket arrows. Collapsible
My
arrows.
secret
Nothing will go
second
wrong.
arrow stash.
Pocket sand. No.
Gino's favorite.
Delicious.
I think even still during moments like, for example, Gale and Katniss are like, District 8 is getting bombed. We're just going to ignore orders and go and try and take down these planes. And Plutarch kind of agrees to it because I think he secretly is like, yeah, this is going to get us what we actually want for our show. And then like at the end when the whole horrible bombing the Capitol children thing happens, Katniss also says, I think it's in this moment, don't quote me on this 100%, but something similar around this like same moment is when Katniss says, yeah, well, Plutarch got what he wanted. It's like, that's definitely a show and it's going to end the war the way that he wants to. And unfortunately, her own sister gets caught in the crossfire. I think there's a really sad line in Mockingjay where basically this is after Katniss witnesses the bombing and she's just like in the dark depths of grief. And she says, "Gradually, I'm forced to accept who I am, a badly burned girl with no wings, with no fire, and no sister." And it kind of goes backwards from Mockingjay. She's lost her wings. And then Catching Fire, she's lost her just like spark and fire for this cause and for life. And then her sister, which is the whole reason why this all started in the first place. It's just so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
No one does it like Suzanne Collins.
I know.
No one does it quite like Suzanne Collins.
Yeah.
So now Victoria's going to give us her best rendition of of all the music in the Hunger Games.
Starting with the whistle. Go ahead. Hey, nice.
I think it's awesome that Suzanne Collins incorporates music so frequently in her books. Because in Gregor, there's a lot of singing and lots of music involved. And in the Hunger Games, also, there's a lot of important songs that reoccur for various reasons. And especially in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, as implied by the title, there's a lot of songs.
The drum and bass track of Songbirds and Snakes.
That does remind me, though, the song that Katniss sings in third book, like Hanging Tree.
The Hanging Tree, yeah.
Slowed with reverb.
And then like it became like a techno remix or something.
Yeah,
which
it's
was
not great.
terrifying. Like,
Oh,
that was
no.
the astounding feat of writing a story critical of the media and then making movies about it that must be advertised, and then there's just like an entire like thing around it that's basically just like the Hunger Games in like a much tamer sense.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say about it. Or
It
like,
feels
what to
very
do about
Suzanne Collins.
It feels so like dark. Like, okay, Dystopia, it must be said, is not like a what if scenario. It's a reflection of a modern society
Yes.
painted through a dystopian lens. And that has never been more clear than when someone made, when the official Hunger Games team or whatever decided to make a techno remix of The Hanging Tree.
Yeah, it's rough. Also,
Gosh.
I think a lot of people said this when the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out and the casting was revealed. Everyone was like, man, that actor who plays Coriolanus Snow, who becomes the future terrible dictator of Panem and did all those horrible things, he's pretty hot. And everyone was like, that's what she was telling you not to do. Don't forget all his atrocities just because he's attractive. Make sure you remember he killed Finnick.
The actor is attractive, I
they-
suppose.
Yeah.
Which is an important
No,
distinction.
but like a lot. I'm not kidding.
Were there a lot of
There's
people
so
like,
much Coriolanus
I'll
Snow fan
forgive-
fiction.
Well, okay. I mean, that's a playground, all right? Some people are like, listen, I have feelings and I'm just going to do this to get them out, which, you know what? Whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes you write the Fight Club, and sometimes you look at it and go, anti-capitalism. Sometimes you look at it and go, punch, man, punch. Yes, 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 yes. And sometimes you look at it and go, oh, man, toxic masculinity. And then someone else goes, man, punch.
Yeah.
And sometimes you write a hot Coriolanus Snow, and someone looks at it and goes, yes, the folly of how media presents our villains.
Yes.
And someone else goes, hot man, hot dictator genocide man, so hot. Yes.
Well, I think some
Coriolanus
people
did
were like,
nothing wrong. He's too hot to have done anything wrong.
I think some people were like, why didn't they make him less attractive so that I could hate him more?
That's such a awful. I'm
was
sorry.
like-
I normally don't go as hard line with this, but that's an awful opinion.
Just because your dictator's hot does not mean
Well, I just think like
It's like Dune.
It's like
It's like
Dune.
Dune.
It's
Just because
Dune.
it's,
just because you think the big worms are hot doesn't mean they're good. And also Timmy C's there.
just because your leader is compelling and Timmy C or whatever doesn't mean that you should follow him into a holy
It's
roar
like
across
the
stones.
Bane.
It's like the
Just because he's 8 foot tall and shiny doesn't mean he's got good ideas.
I personally was hesitant to read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes at first because I was like, prequel that's about President Snow. Like, I don't want it to become one of those like villain redemption or like try to see things from the villain's point of view. But then I was like, you know what? I trust Suzanne Collins. She knows what she's doing. So I gave it a shot. I did think it was very interesting. Like, she wrote the prequel with a purpose. Here's the capital perspective on the games. I think the most chilling thing about the prequel for me was that you as a reader, you're witnessing these games that are happening and you're like, man, this is like really horrible, but there are also still like moments of humanity that you witness. But from Coriolanus Snow's narration, he's basically just like, man, they're like finally playing the game. And his perspective is just like all these people thrown into the arena, they're just like gonna fall into their basic animal instincts and just like go at each other. But instead, there's like many moments.
He's proved wrong constantly, and yet he can't even register that he's been proved wrong.
Yeah. I think the most important lesson in the prequel is that he had so many opportunities to change. It's not just like one bad thing happened and he became this horrible dictator. There's like a lot of moments that built up. I mean, it's kind of like the Zuko thing, where there's like a lot of moments where it's like he moves forward a little bit and he moves back and he moves forward a little bit and then moves back a lot. But
his progress is inching forward, kind of.
But at a certain point, he goes back so far that he reaches the point of no return.
Right. I was talking about Zuko in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like in Zuko's case, like he's making more progress than he is like backtracking. But it is similar where it's like, this isn't a character who's like this really horrible dude. But then he like met this girl and now he's good now. Oh, but like then this like horrible thing happened and that's what made him is. No, it's like this happened. He made a pretty bad choice. And then the next thing that happened, even though he feels regret about the previous choice, he still decides to make the next bad choice and then another bad choice and another and another. And that's how he becomes who he is.
It's like the inverse of the concept of the one bad day, like the Joker one bad day. Everyone's one bad day from becoming the Joker. But no, it's not necessarily true. I've never had that happened to me.
Why did you say it like that?
I think Jino became very aware of like, in case there's anything listening that could try to test that theory.
But like
Joker?
Like, how are villains made? The thing happened. Now they're evil. No, I think Suzanne Collins, from what you said, is telling us that no, everything's always more complicated than you ever could have imagined.
Yes.
Pivoting off of discussion directly on the books and movies, did you guys ever play that online Hunger Games simulator where you put in a bunch of names of characters and then you hit simulate and then it just like randomly generates a bunch of like blank killed blank, blank found a fish, character A huddled with character B for warmth, etc., etc.
Never played.
You've never? It was a phenomenon when we were in school.
Oh, that makes me think of one of those like Facebook quizzes where it's like,
exactly,
give us all your personal information and we'll tell you which bottled water brand you are.
It was basically a website and you'd put in like 24 friends or like 24 characters, and then they're also like presets and stuff, and then you just hit like begin the games, and then it would just pick from just like a random assortment of sentences.
Yeah, it'd be like in the first bloodbath, like these 8 characters died, and then the next one will be like so and so died from poisoning.
Yeah, literally, and then
it's kind of like the Oregon Trail.
The
automated Oregon Trail.
But automated. You don't have any input. And then someone wins and you're like, wow. Or those like online quizzes about like, which district are you from? Yeah. Like, what personality do you have? Fish. Tree.
Coal.
I mean, those were staples in the
Mountains.
fandom culture. Yeah, I did a lot of those simulator games. I'm pretty sure at one point, like, again, like this was back in my Attack on Titan phase. But we definitely threw in Attack on Titan characters into the Hunger Games. I think for us, it was mostly fun because, like, sometimes it would randomly generate, like, scenarios that were kind of ironic based on what actually happened in the canon of whatever show we were pulling characters from.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's surprisingly sophisticated.
Yeah.
We're going to show you this website.
We got to do it.
It's monstrous and goes against the themes of the books, but it's real fun. The phenomenon that is the Hunger Games is really interesting to me. I've read some reviews, and by that I mean I skimmed the Wikipedia pages, of the Hunger Games books that were negative because it wasn't, quote, sexy enough like Twilight.
Huh.
Like, people were reading these books and taking wildly different messages away from them, like completely different connotations of like, oh, it's about young love, needs to be hotter, too much death and socio-political commentary.
I mean, I think like, again, I think that some reviewers or some book publishers were like, why do people like the Hunger Games? Well, it must be because of this love triangle. That's what
Yeah.
the kids want, right? And so that's why like almost every YA dystopia after that had to at its core have a romance, and any other socio-political commentary was almost like secondary to
Or there just
like
wasn't any socio-political commentary.
yeah,
Like
most
it became
of the ones,
dystopia for the sake of dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not trying to say anything. That's why, like, I'm guilty of this, like, roping the Hunger Games in with, like, Divergent and Maze Runner and all those other, like, YA dystopia books and being like, trash. But no, the Hunger Games was written with a purpose,
Yes.
with a clear, stated purpose.
I'm not saying that there can't be romance in like YA dystopia books, but
Mhm.
the romance in, like you said, like it's a metaphor, but it's also like done so purposefully.
Yeah.
And unlike other YA books where it's almost like the characters have this like unexplainable attraction to each other and they're like, you're my person. And that's just like, they just know.
Yeah.
Katniss and Peeta have to literally like wrestle with and fight for even the possibility of being together. So I think that's like what makes it different as a love storyline.
Yeah.
Compared
As opposed
to these
like
other books.
Divergent and Four was his name.
Yeah, because he had 4 fears. The name thing is so funny because for a while they're like, Triss is like, why is your name 4? And he's like,
Triss.
yeah.
Short for Asajj Ventress. That's 4. He has 4 fears, and I'm 87. But that's a dark secret I can't tell you about.
Oh my gosh, I almost want us to cover Divergent just because I
I can't read Divergent again. I loved it so much, and then the last 2 I've never been more mad at a book than the last 2 chapters of Divergent.
I actually
Of
made it.
the first book?
Yeah,
I made it to the end. I made it all the way to Allegiant.
I really enjoyed Divergent. And then the last 2 chapters ruined it for me, and I can't even explain why. And then I picked up the second book and opened it up and went, oh, and then I never touched it again.
I just remember one of the times my friend and I were talking about Divergent, and my friend's mom walks in. She's like, oh, you guys are talking about Divergent? She's like, those books aren't very good. I think you guys could write better than...
Oh.
I was like 16
Now,
or something. I was like
this
17.
like supportive mom or like scathing critique mom?
It was both, where it's both
Nice. The perfect middle ground you want from your mom.
like, where I was like, I guess this is both an upvote for my personal writing skills and just like a huge bash on Veronica Roth.
Yeah. No, you want your mom to support you while also roasting someone at the same time.
Anyways, we should wrap up this episode.
Do you think Peeta's parents were like, he'll grow up to be a baker? What's a good bread name for him? Bread?
Okay, Katniss's name is literally Swamp Potato. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know.
They bet real wrong, though. They're like, we're bakers. We're all bakers. Our son's going to grow up to be a baker. And then he turns out to grow up to be, what? A soldier?
Sad.
Impromptu. Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you for listening to our Nostalgia Club podcast episode on Suzanne Collins and the Hunger Games and just how much we appreciate Suzanne Collins' writing. Hey, if you liked the episode, you should totally follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to and leave a review. It really, really helps us out. You can also follow us on Instagram at Nostalgia Club Podcast or, right?
Yes.
Right. Or send us an email at nostalgicalpodcast@gmail.com if you want to do that. Anything else I missed?
No.
Cool.
Good job.
Thank you. Usually Victoria does this, and she's much better at public speaking than I am. Hey, what do we say? Oh, until next time. I was going to say, like, in other words.
I love you.
No, come on.
Sinatra.
Oh, yeah.
In other words. That's Sinatra, right?
Yes, Fly Me to the Moon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Until next time.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who say murdered 3?
Club remix. Man died. Club remix.